Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monetize Your Message at a special time this week. We are here to help you figure out how to take your messaging to the next level and use it to create consistent income in your business and create raving fans who love everything that you do and everything that you put out because it is on message. And we've been doing some interviews lately, and we'll be picking those back up again next week. But right now, we are just the two of us, and we just got back from a weekend away, which is really important sometimes to step away. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about what our weekends entailed and how it ties into messaging. So Marie was at Disney World, and I went rock climbing. And we're going to talk a little bit about both of those and what they have to do with messaging and the parallels between these seemingly very different activities.
Exactly. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, I'm Marie, and this is my co-host, Jessie, and we are together, North Star Messaging and Strategy. And of course, we're always thinking, right, how can our daily life experiences relate to our business and relate to your business? So let's go to item number one. The lesson, the carryaway from both rock climbing and Disney World, one of them was consistency is king. We say this all the time in our own mastermind and in our group programs with our clients, but it's super true, and never is it more true than in these two places. So I'm going to expound a little bit upon the frivolousness of Disney side of things, and then Jessie's going to take it over from the complimentary side. But so Disney is probably one of the most on-brand companies that has ever been. I'm sure you've noticed this, whether you have watched a Disney movie, been in a Disney store, or been to Disneyland or Disney World, any of their gajillions of locations around the globe. And but what really struck me is how on message each of the locations is within Disney World. So for instance, we went to Magic Kingdom. This was 2 days ago. It was magical. And one of the areas that we went into was Adventureland, and it was all themed around adventure, right? And all themed around safari and the infamous Tiki Room and Aladdin's Flying Magic Carpet and the Pirates of the Caribbean. And it was all kind of languages. And what was amazing about it is that that message was so consistent throughout the whole area that it even conveyed into the architecture, into the music that you're hearing, these little subtle clues. It conveyed into the food that they had at the restaurants. Like if you went to these restaurants over here, you got things like a ginormous turkey leg you could gnaw on, where you would not find in the more sort of pristine and uptight, like Freedom Square area that kind of looks like a colonial village. It was just like amazing how consistent they were even within these sort of mini brands. And the one thing that got me thinking about was around how we talk about how you have your own brand, right, as a business, but sometimes you have courses or programs that kind of deserve their own brand. And so to be able to have that in a way that is consistent within itself, but also still makes sense in the greater theme, to be able to tie that consistency thread through everything you're doing is like a masterful work of art. And you don't have to be Disney World with millions of employees to accomplish this at all. It just takes thinking about it, being really mindful about the message that you're putting out there, and how the different programs that you offer or the different services that you offer all tie together, have their own identity, but still also are a part of the greater whole. So that was one of my favorite takeaways from my visit to Disney World for how we can apply Disney level messaging tactics to our own business.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool. I have a close friend who works for Disney, and the branding, their messaging goes beyond even the worlds. It's kind of interesting how they do that. Like their employees aren't called employees, they're called cast members. Little things like that actually create a culture around the entire business and allow it to be an immersive experience. And when you take that to your own brand and your own business, it's a good question to ask yourself is how do you want to immerse your potential clients and your audience members in your brand. So it's not just I'm looking at this brand. I'm experiencing this brand. It's part of an experience, and you are a part of that experience, especially if you are the forward-facing person of your brand. Which takes us to my weekend, which was a little grungier, a little dirtier. And
I don't know. There was a lot of sweating in Orlando, Florida.
And it was definitely magical, but in a totally different way. So I went out to Joshua Tree National Park, which is in the middle of the desert. It's in, I think, the Mojave, or where the Mojave Desert and the Colorado Desert meet or something. But it's hot and dry, and I went rock climbing outside for the first time. And for anyone who knows me, you know I'm obsessed with rock climbing, but I've only done it at indoor gyms for the past 4 years or so. And so this was my first time to take what I'd learned indoors, outdoors. And what I found was that even though they were two very different experiences, there was a lot of consistency between the two. So the messaging within rock climbing as a sport is very much a messaging of empowerment, a message of being able to, what I've heard it called a moving meditation, which I love, because it's this idea of a physical and a mental struggle, but also accomplishment. And so when you are rock climbing, you have to be consistent with a few things. So your messaging has to be consistent from something as small as what are the words that you say to one another in order to say, I'm ready to start climbing, or I'm going to fall, catch me, things like that. Because if you aren't consistent with your messaging, you die. And that's not a good thing. You don't want to die. So, when I was out there going, Maria's laughing at me because she's like, I'm really glad you didn't die too.
Yes.
But the whole idea behind rock climbing, and the reason why I am so drawn to it, is because there is this messaging component to it. And everyone who is within the sport of rock climbing tends to be a certain type of person. They're some of the friendliest people you'll ever meet. They're people who are willing to challenge themselves, but also to help lift other people up. And it's because they've all bought into this idea that rock climbing is the sort of sport where you are in competition with yourself and no one else. So you could have, for example, this last weekend, we had one person who was at the event who had never put on a rock climbing harness in her life. She had never climbed indoors, outdoors, anything. And we had another person who had been climbing her entire life and was, just going up the hard routes on the wall. And so everyone's kind of bought into this idea that rock climbing, it is a collaboration, and it is consistent in the way where you need to know certain things, certain basic rules. But once you have those, and once you start getting on the wall, you are allowed to be a little creative with things like how you climb the route and how you approach rock climbing personally as an individual. So it's a very different application of messaging, but the end result is the same in that it is an experience. And when you go for the experience, because it's one of those things when you're on the wall, you're like, why am I doing this to myself? And I think Marie and I have experienced that with hiking too. It's like, why are we destroying our bodies in this way? But then you finish and you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. And it's because you've kind of bought into this message and you experience it and you believe it and you live it. And that's really important to keep in mind within your own business, things, foundation pieces that everyone needs to know. So in rock climbing, everyone needs to know the phrases, or you might need to know how to tie certain knots. So what is the base of your business that everyone needs to know in order to understand what your business is about? And then what is the experience of your business like?
Totally. Also, endorphins help.
Also that. Adrenaline.
Yeah, which may not be an application for your business. That's totally fine.
Hopefully no one's business is, at risk of killing them or anything like that.
Right, exactly. Yes. But if it is, waivers are good.
Yeah.
So the other thing that kind of came up for me at Disney World was all about the experience. So, and the experience of being on the in crowd or being an expert. So we've been talking just a little bit in our business recently about us being experts, right? Like as business owners, the thing that we really are legitimately experts at, not saying we should put on a front or a face and dupe people into thinking we're experts, but those things that we really are talented at, how can we display that? How can we leverage that? But then there's the other side of it. And Disney World kind of made me cognizant of this. Okay, I'm going to gripe a little, but I promise it has a purpose. So the last time I went to Disney World, they had a fast pass system, right? Where if you wanted to go on a ride, but the wait time was really long, what you would do is you would go up to the ride, push a button, it would spit out a little sheet of paper. It would tell you when to come back. And then while you're kind of virtually waiting in line for that one, you could go ride another ride. And what has happened since then is they have moved it into this computerized system. But the problem is there wasn't really any kind of adequate information about it. Like, I, as the customer, had to go up to a cast member, right, and ask them, I can't get the app to work now, and I don't know what to do. And then they're like, well, you can go to this place way over here super inconveniently. So I think one of the takeaways from this is to allow your customer to also feel like an expert, at what it is they're trying to do. So the thing that they're trying to do is different from what you're trying to do, right? You're leading them along a path. You are sort of many times we're often sort of a reflection of them, but maybe a few steps ahead, and we can kind of guide them along that path. But part of that story that many of us tell is how nice would it have been if I had had a guide, right? If I weren't just stumbling through the dark, let me be that guide for you. And we've talked before in previous Monetize Your Messaging episodes about being Obi-Wan Kenobi, not Luke Skywalker, right? In your messaging. But for those of your clients who are Luke Skywalkers, they need that Obi-Wan Kenobi. And for things that are not high touch, if it's a program where you have a one-on-one coaching and it's super clear how they can get in touch with you and get lots of interaction, great. They're probably going to be fine. They probably don't need an instruction manual for digging into whatever it is. But if it's something where it's kind of low touch, we didn't buy any of the fancy bells and whistles. We just bought the basic ticket and walked in the door, right, to Disney World. And we had literally no clue what to do at that point. Having instructions, having a guide, having signage in the case of Disney, but in the case of your business, maybe it's just a welcome email that really helps them feel like experts at the thing that you are giving them to do. Whether it's a freebie or a tripwire, a low priced offer, something like that, or a self-guided course, more instructions may not always be better, but having instructions period and giving them the freedom to feel empowered to actually fulfill the thing that they have agreed to do, whether it's because they just signed up for your email list or they've actually paid for something. That's just good customer support. So bear that in mind. Even if Disney isn't perfect, you, with your smaller budget than Disney, I guarantee it, can totally surpass them in this aspect, at least, of customer support.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to understand where your expertise is and being willing to speak up about it. And this was something I ran into over the weekend because, like I said before, we had people of all different ability levels who were here at this trip. There were about 12 girls there, and some had never climbed before, some were experts, and most people were somewhere in the middle. Some had climbed a lot indoors and never outdoors, like me. Others had been outdoors maybe a handful of times. Some people knew how to do a more advanced type of climbing, and some people knew how to do a more basic type of climbing. And one of the very first things that everyone was asked is, who knows how to belay? And for those of you who aren't familiar, belaying is the person who's standing at the bottom, feeding the rope to the climber so that the climber can keep climbing higher, and then also letting them back down to the ground at the end. And so the belay person is a very important person because they're the person that keeps the other person from dying and also allows them to have more slack if they need more slack and want to climb faster, or catches them if they fall. So the belayer is a very important person, and you have to have certain types of equipment to belay. And so this first question of who is comfortable belaying was a very important question. And at first, a lot of people didn't really speak up because they were a little anxious because it was a new group of people who didn't necessarily know one another. So me, I know how to belay. And so I can stand on the ground and I can help people in the climbing process by taking on that role. And if I didn't speak up and say, yes, I'm comfortable with doing that, we would have been able to have one less person climbing at any given time. So we had 5 ropes set up. We needed 5 people who could belay. And if only one person spoke up, then it would have taken that much longer for people to be able to get on the wall and climb. And so in your business, it's hard sometimes to step up and say, I can do that. I'm an expert in that. It's hard to own that in yourself. But think about how much longer the process of your client getting the result that they need will take if you don't step up and say, I'm an expert in that. I know how to do it. I'm not going to let you fall off the wall, and I will be here to catch you and support you along the way. And that's a very important point to reach in your business. I just did a live about this yesterday, actually, where you reach that point where you can say, I'm an expert, not an amateur. And it's a hard line to see. And it can be different for everyone, but it's important to think about when you do have that confidence, why you have that confidence, or why you don't have that confidence and should have that confidence. So, for example, in this particular experience, there are 2 different pieces of equipment that you can use to belay with. One is one that I've used very frequently, and one is one I have used less frequently. I happen to have the one that I use less frequently with me. And so when they asked me if I could belay, that was one of the reasons why I hesitated at first, because I was like, oh, well, I can, but I have this piece of equipment I don't use as often as the other piece of equipment. But then I realized, but I have used this equipment. I've used it a ton of times. It's just been a little while. And so I went up and I said, yes, I can belay. Will you give me a quick refresher on this piece of equipment so I can make sure I'm using it correctly, but I can totally do it because I've done it before and I'm confident in it. And so that's the other piece, is if there's something you aren't confident in or something that you know you can do very well but might need a refresher in, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to step out and ask for support from other people. It's one of the great benefits of Marie and I working together, is that we can recognize that we each have a lot of similarities, but also different strengths. And so we can say, hey, I'm working with this client on this, but I would appreciate your eyes on it because I know that you're stronger in this area. So a lot of different ways in which you're messaging.
Sorry, I got dropped.
Are we back? I think we're back.
I'm back. I'm an expert getting dropped.
Carrie joined us and everything broke. Hi, Carrie.
I am sure that's a coincidence.
Yes. It's
Carrie
totally
does not break things. Thank you for joining us, Carrie.
So yeah, I think, it's this combination of being an expert, being willing to say that you're an expert and step out of your box of that box of uncertainty, and take some risks, be creative. Even when I was on the rock wall, so, I've climbed in gyms, and climbing outside, it was a different type of climbing. There were a lot of different challenges that came up. It required me to be like, okay, I trust that the person holding onto me is going to catch me if I fall. And I'm going to try this thing that I've never tried before and see if it works. And it did. But if I had freaked out and been like, oh no, I've never tried that before, I'm not going to, I would have never known if it would work or not. So also this idea of being able to take risks because you trust someone else's expertise. If I didn't trust the person holding me on the ground, I wouldn't have gotten very far off the ground.
And I think your point too about asking questions, like being willing to ask questions, but also giving your clients the space to ask you questions is super important. I mean, I think that's a takeaway from both of our weekends. So, hopefully that's helpful. So being consistent, being on message, and finding ways to find that connective tissue and connective threads, even if you have multiple sort of different sub-brands, messages. But then also this being ready to own your expert status, being willing to ask questions, and giving your audience the space to do the same. Those are some great takeaways from this weekend, in the most unlikely of places.
Absolutely. And we're really glad also that we were able to take a step away and find these messages about messaging in other places, because they're everywhere. And I'm willing to bet that the area of expertise that you have in your business, you can find examples of it everywhere too. So, be looking at the world around you and see where it can tie into your own messaging. And hopefully you have some great takeaways from our weekend experiences. And if there's anything else you want to hear us talk about with messaging, as always, be sure to comment below. And we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled interviews next week, but we will also be popping in occasionally, just the two of us. So when it's the two of us, we can talk about any topic that you'd like, anything messaging and strategy related that will help you move your business forward. So be sure to include those in the comments and we'll get back to you. And we look forward to continuing to support you on this journey.
Exactly. There is a super empowering interview coming up next that you do not want to miss. This is going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Tell me you got that right. Next Tuesday on May 30th with Ashley Blatt. She's amazing. You do not want to miss it.
Absolutely. And we will see you then.